Hey everyone, welcome to our wrap-up of our first Princess Cruise and our first cruise in Japan. You're going to want to stick around until the end to find out if we'll take another Princess Cruise. Now, picture this. You're excited about your first cruise on a particular cruise line around southern Japan, and you've got your itinerary all set, and bam! Typhoon causes your cancellation of your first few ports, along with a few other surprises. But don't worry, we made the absolute best of it, and today we're going to give you all the highlights. Well, mostly highlights about our 10-day journey on the Diamond Princess. Now, if you're thinking about cruising in Japan, or enjoy cruising at all, this video is probably for you. We're also going to touch on a few of the curveballs that came our way, like when someone broke their foot right before the cruise, but we all survived and we got to explore some incredible places and discovered some tips along the way that you'll definitely want to hear about. So stick around, hit that thumbs up, and let's dive in because you're going to want to hear if Princess was able to make up for this Typhoon shakeup.
Let's kick things off with the typhoon that threw our itinerary off, Typhoon Shanshan. Before boarding, we knew there might be some weather challenges, but we didn't expect half our ports to be canceled within the first few days. When we first got to our cabin, there was a letter waiting for us updating us on the status of the itinerary for the first few days. The first half of our original itinerary was to have amazing stops like Kobe, Kochi, and Hiroshima. As Mother Nature had other plans, we ended up with almost 5 unexpected sea days and cruised way further south in order to avoid the storm. Now, we must say, the crew, including the captain, were great at keeping us up to date on the weather and of what changes were occurring as we went.
Now, we did get a replacement port on day 5, that's Miyakojima, and we'll tell you more about that in a moment when we talk about the ports that we did end up going to.
With all those sea days, we really got to know the Diamond Princess, and the first thing we have to say is the service was top-notch. Princess Cruises still offers twice daily cabin service, which felt like a treat compared to other lines right now.
Now, about our standard balcony cabin, let's just say the balcony was a bit cozy, so if you're a fan of sprawling balconies, this might not be your dream setup. It's certainly sufficient for 2 people to sit and take in the views, but beyond that, you're not going to be sprawling out on a lounger or having more than 2 people out there comfortably, at least for too long. But for us, it got the job done, but it's certainly smaller than some other balconies we've had on other lines. And we must mention the air conditioning in the cabin. It is an older ship, and it showed in this regard. The crew let us know that between sailing in a very hot, humid climate and it being an older ship, there were several sections of cabins that had an issue keeping the cabins cool. But they provided us a fan and we made it work. So just something to be aware of if you're planning to cruise on a smaller cruise ship in a similar environment. Okay, let's talk food. From the buffet to specialty dining, we have no complaints. The buffet, the Horizon Court, was easy to navigate and we always found a table. The food in the buffet was always hot, and overall it was really good. Well, there was one exception.
Just the one.
The main dining room, of which there are 5, the Pacific Moon, the Savoy, the Santa Fe, Vivaldi, and the larger international dining room, where they hosted afternoon tea, of which we did twice on this sailing, was really good. It's a nice way to break up an afternoon. Some of the dining rooms looked a little more modern than others, but in terms of the service and the food, we were impressed. They served up lobster dinner near the end of the cruise, and that was very nice. Well, for one of us at least.
Yeah, not a lobster fan, but Sabatini's Italian on deck 7. Now that was more up my alley. 4 courses in an Italian-inspired setting. Because it's a specialty restaurant, there is a surcharge, but if you're looking for something a little extra special, this is definitely a good option, and we would definitely go back. There are additional specialty dining options, including the Sterling Steakhouse and the Brazilian restaurant, which is run out of 1/2 of the buffet during its operating hours.
For casual dining locations, there's Alfredo's Pizza, which is run out of the Pacific Moon dining room. We went there for lunch one day. The servings are a bit smaller compared to other options on board, but it's okay. And Kai Sushi's the onboard sushi restaurant. Now that's a set menu, but the serving sizes are really big.
And of course you have poolside pizza from Prego Pizzeria, or you'll find other options right alongside. And there was no shortage of other little food events going on. For example, they had a dessert and pastry extravaganza up on the pool deck at one point. And there was also ice cream, and yeah, there was absolutely no shortage of food on this ship, and it was all very good.
Knowing that we were going to have extra sea days made us wonder if we'd run out of things to do, but no. Starting right away from the sail away party on day 1 with the singing and dancing and entertainment staff and some of the initial good weather, there was always something happening. From production shows in the theater to casual live music in the lounges, there was plenty going on for everyone. We have to say that considering we were on board for 10 days, we didn't actually take in a lot of the evening shows in the theater because we found ourselves so comfortable just sipping a drink in one of the many large lounges. We were quite content to take in some of the more casual entertainment in some of these locations, many of which had excellent sea views.
Oh, and another little onboard activity we enjoyed was getting to try our traditional yukata robes as part of the Japanese cultural activities.
Yeah, we came across that one by accident, but it was a lot of fun. There was also no shortage of various themed deck parties, including 80s night, and of course you could always hit the dance club, Skywalker's nightclub up on deck 17. In the atrium, or the piazza as it's referred to on Princess, there was always some sort of live music or entertainment, and then there was the farewell party at the end of the cruise. It was all really good.
And when it comes to the pools, we typically shy away from the crowded pool deck. However, on Diamond Princess, we always found that both the main pool and the adults-only pool was never overly crowded, and we always found a spot to settle in. There's also the onsen bath, which is part of the spa in the event you're looking for something even more relaxing.
So when it comes to our overall onboard experience, given this was our first Princess cruise, we familiarized ourselves with the Princess Plus and Princess Premier packages and ended up choosing the Plus package for us, which includes 2 casual dining options during the duration of the cruise. It also includes 2 premium desserts each day. Now, we tried 2 of these desserts and it was more than enough for us. But if you're a lover of sweet treats, this is definitely a good bonus with these packages. It also includes the Plus beverage package, which covers drinks up to $15, the Wi-Fi for 1 device each, and all your gratuities, which are referred to as crew appreciation on Princess. We'll put a link to the packages in the description. Oh, and we must say that compared to beverage packages alone on other cruise lines, the Princess package options seem to be quite reasonable, but you'll still want to look at what's included and see if it's right for you.
While we are still talking about the onboard experience, we should mention that the Diamond Princess has self-serve laundry facilities, which is very convenient, especially on a long sailing. You can pay for the machines and laundry products with your medallion. Also, mobility comes in mind in light of me traveling with a broken foot. The size of ship was ideal, and we think that will be the case if you have a mobility device. Although I will say the corridors running along the cabins can get a bit cramped when the room attendants have their carts out.
Let's move on to the ports, starting with our embarkation port, Yokohama. We arrived at the Tokyo Narita airport, and after getting familiarized with the Japanese vending machines because we needed a cold drink in what was a very hot arrival, we took a bus transfer to Yokohama, where we arrived kind of late, but we arrived to our comfortable Hyatt Regency Yokohama, which was fantastic. But there are other options in the area that are a short distance to the cruise port. We had 1 full pre-cruise day to explore Yokohama, so after grabbing some breakfast the next morning, where we were served by a robot of course, we made our way to the waterfront and took in the Red Brick Warehouse, which was great because it had some historical elements, but also some shops and some more nice views.
We then headed to Cup Noodles Museum, where we learned the history of instant ramen noodles. That might sound quirky, but it's surprisingly a fun stop. And if you choose, you can make your own customized noodles. You know, we did. It's definitely a place to check out if you're spending time in Yokohama, and if you have kids with you, they seem to be loving it. We continued exploring Yokohama on foot, finding more to eat. And then before we knew it, it was evening.
We spent our evening exploring Asia's largest Chinatown. If you have just 1 evening to spend before your cruise, we'd recommend going to Chinatown because it's close to the cruise terminal, all the nearby hotels, and there's tons to eat of course, and plenty of people watching to do. So overall, just a great place to spend some time. Now, the following day was cruise day, and we were able to walk directly to the cruise port from our hotel with a quick stop at 7-Eleven, and it was only 10 minutes, which is convenient because that's not always the case in a lot of the embarkation ports. So it gave us some initial views of the Diamond Princess as we walked up. Once on board, we had a beautiful sail away out of Yokohama, and as we said, that began our almost 5 days at sea as we started outrunning the Typhoon. That being said, and because we were able to move out of the storm's way, the weather was actually pretty good where we were, with the occasional high swells. There was really no weather to be concerned with where we were located. And that's why we love a cruise vacation, because unlike if you're in a hotel room or on a land resort, which can't move out of the way of a storm, a cruise ship can simply get out of the way or take you to another location and it becomes part of the adventure.
And then before we knew it, 5 days had passed and we arrived in our unexpected port of Miyakojima. Though a sudden addition to our itinerary, it turned out to be a good surprise. This island is part of Japan's Okinawa prefecture and known for its beaches and coral reefs, making it popular with snorkelers and divers.
Now, due to Will still recovering from his broken foot, we chose to explore the town of Miyakojima on foot in search of a local temple. And we were successful, and we found the Miyako Shrine, which provided some insight into the island's spiritual heritage. We then quickly needed a cold drink before finding a local bite to eat, which in itself turned out to be rather interesting.
A fruit and whipped cream sandwich, which we were not previously familiar to, but I had it and I definitely would have had seconds, probably because it's more like a dessert than a lunch.
Yeah, we do like our desserts.
For the most part, we just wandered the streets, found some shops with some rather interesting items. We grabbed an ice cream and made our way back to the ship after getting quite a few steps in.
Yeah, although an unexpected location, it was so great to finally arrive in a Japanese port and begin exploring. Although we were disappointed to lose our day in Hiroshima, especially, with Miyakojima, we unexpectedly got to check out a bit of Japan's tropical side. And considering that the deviation was from a typhoon, we were quite happy to end up here and had no complaints about ending up in a place where we would have never otherwise planned to go, because we hadn't even heard of it.
Then we were on our way to Busan, South Korea, giving us another sea day. We were now following behind the Typhoon, which made for an interesting day of a bit rougher seas. Again, part of the adventure, Busan marked our first regular scheduled port. From the port of Busan, we spiraled up a few bridges and headed to a temple which was right on the coast. It was the Buddhist temple apparently built in 1376. The views were spectacular, especially after climbing 108 stairs when it got even better. We were there for about an hour, but we could have easily enjoyed some additional time there.
Then we headed to X the Sky, South Korea's second tallest skyscraper. We went up to the observatory located on the 100th floor, which had panoramic views of the city, the ocean, the surrounding mountains. We weren't too sure about that glass bottom walkway, but it was fun to watch others going across it. Oh, and I headed to the world's highest Starbucks on the 99th floor.
Then we headed over to the international market, which is one of the largest in Korea. We were running a little bit short on time here, but we got to explore a bit. For us, the highlight was definitely the seaside temple, especially with those views. If you're into architecture, this modern city with all its skyscrapers will probably be of interest to you, and overall, we would encourage you to go exploring if Busan is on your itinerary. But it was time to head back to the ship for a stunning sail away.
The following day, we arrived in Sasebo. Now, disembarkation here was, to be frank, a bit of a mess, with extra immigration paperwork, and it took an hour and a half standing in line just to get off the ship. And then we had to make our way through immigration before we could start exploring. Now, we don't know what all the details are about how the immigration process works, but at this particular port, everyone had to disembark, go through immigration, and that was even if you weren't planning on taking an excursion or entering into Sasebo. So perhaps there's no practical solution to it, but just be aware that if you're arriving at this port, you may experience something similar. So it might be best to try to get off the ship as early as possible if you want to take full advantage of your time there. Now, the waterfront area was quiet, and it was great just to enjoy a stroll on the waterfront, which had cafes and benches and more great views, of course. The area felt peaceful, and it almost had no crowds. With no planned excursion due to trying to limit activity on Will's foot, we decided to explore independently despite our late start. Now, after making our way to the small shopping area, we came across the large Sun Plaza outdoor covered mall. Now, this was perfect to escape the sun, get a little bit of shade, and still stay in the fresh air. I was hoping to try the Sasebo burger while I was there, but the spot we found had an hour and a half wait just to get one. By the time we explored this mall, we realized we were not going to have time to see much else. We managed to have an excellent lunch and then wandered through the additional streets and alleys as we made our way back to the ship.
Overall, we were disappointed that we did not get to see or experience more, but our disappointment was short-lived, as when we returned to the ship, we were treated to some local drummers who put on a great show right on the pier, followed by the kids, who were also great. We then had a beautiful sail away out of Sasebo. We then arrived the following day in Shimizu, where we were greeted by some dolphins, and where the highlight was to be the fantastic views of Mount Fuji. But to get started, we went to a traditional Japanese tea ceremony where we learned the origins of matcha tea and checked out their art museum. Then we headed to our seaside view of Mount Fuji, where we made our way through a small pine forest, and as luck would have it, our only overcast day of the entire cruise. The one day we needed clear skies. We were hopeful that the clouds would dissipate and we would get the views that we were hoping for. But with only a very small glimpse of Mount Fuji, we really didn't get to see any of it.
Yes, but with that said, we did make our way along the beach, which was still beautiful despite it being overcast. And apparently, this is the reality in the region where the weather can change quickly, especially in terms of the cloud cover near Mount Fuji, so it's really hit and miss on whether you'll actually see it or not. Because of the cloud cover, the highlights of this day ended up being the tea ceremony, which gave us that nice cultural component that we always find interesting when we visit new places. When we got back to Shimizu, we wandered around a bit, checked out a few of the ports, and then it was time for what turned out to be one of the most unique sailaways we've ever had. It turned out that this was Princess's final port of the Japanese season, so we were given a little extra special sailaway with some fireworks and a bit of fanfare.
The next day was disembarkation back in Yokohama, where we said goodbye to Diamond Princess. We grabbed a transfer we arranged through the cruise line into Narita, where we got to spend one full day before heading home. When we originally planned this trip, we had hoped to spend some time in Tokyo. However, with having a broken foot just days before the cruise, one of the things we altered was Tokyo because we weren't sure about navigating such a busy city with a broken foot.
Instead, we opted to spend some time in Narita, where we anticipated it would be a bit quieter, and we must say we do not regret that decision because we thoroughly enjoyed it. What turned out to be the highlight was the Narita-sen Shinshoji Temple and its park. The complex is one of Narita's top attractions. Again, more culture and more history that's best seen in person, but if you want to get an idea about it, you can check out our video where we covered quite a bit of the area and what the park has to offer.
We did ultimately determine we went through the park backwards, but I don't think that really affected our overall experience.
No, we got to wander through the streets of Narita afterwards, and we checked out some more local shops. Now, if you're flying in or out of Narita, we would say that it's definitely worth taking a day to check out Narita. We found it to be a great ending to our overall trip. We spent our final night at the International Garden Hotel Narita, which was only $68 US, and it was a nice hotel, but most importantly, it had free shuttles to Narita Station, the airport, and other local spots. It was a great affordable option in Narita.
Overall, we had an amazing time in Japan, and we would definitely return and do another cruise, not only to get to the ports that we missed because of the typhoon, but to check out more of the country.
In terms of personal highlights for me, I would have to say it was a bit of the unknowns at the start of the trip. With having to change course because of the storm and whatnot, it was a bit of an adventure in itself, which I like. Especially ending up in a location like Miyakojima that we would have never otherwise visited. That's not to say we weren't disappointed with missing a few ports, especially Hiroshima, but if that's our excuse to go back, we're good with that. What was one of the highlights for you?
Well, first of all, I was glad I was just able to simply go on this trip, seeing I broke my foot a week prior. And although it caused a few limitations overall, it was fantastic. But my highlight would have to be the tea ceremony in Shimizu because I really enjoy those cultural elements.
In terms of the Diamond Princess, and it being our first Princess cruise, I think we can say we will definitely sail with Princess again. Now, we would like to try a different experience, maybe on one of their larger ships, maybe in a different region, just to get a better taste of what they're all about. But one of the highlights of the experience on board was that laid-back atmosphere that really gave us the opportunity to meet some really great people, which is always a nice bonus when you're on a cruise. Now, speaking of doing another Princess cruise, we might as well announce right now that in a matter of just a couple of weeks, we are indeed going on another Princess cruise. So be sure to subscribe and hit that bell notification because you'll want to see what ship and where we're headed for our next cruise adventure.
This is probably a good time to mention that given the disruptions at the beginning of our cruise this time, and although cruise lines do not have to compensate for such changes, especially when it's weather related, Princess offered a future cruise credit equal to 20% of our cruise fare as a goodwill gesture. Now, conveniently, we already had our next Princess cruise booked, so this was certainly a nice perk for us.
If you're planning a cruise around Japan, we hope this video gave you some inspiration and maybe a few tips along the way to make the most of it. Now, let us know in the comments which of these ports caught your eye, or share your own cruising tips for those who might be traveling on a Princess cruise. or if you're traveling to Japan. Okay, we're not done yet. We've got all of our cruises lined up for 2025, and you definitely don't want to miss what's coming. Now, before we go, we've got a little channel update for you. We are just shy of hitting our first 1,000 subscribers, which will be a huge milestone for a little channel like ours. So we invite you to join us on our future adventures by hitting the subscribe button. It'll not only help us reach this exciting goal, but you'll also become one of our first 1,000 subscribers. And we'd be so incredibly grateful. While you're at it, hit the notification bell so you don't miss those upcoming adventures.
Thanks for watching.
We'll see you soon on our next cruise.
That's right. Subscribe now to be part of Will and Steven's first 1,000 subscribers while you await their next travel adventure. Check out these videos.